welcoming you back to the Speakeasy with Guy Green. Tony Bauer at my side, and joining us from somewhere out east, Mr. Frank Gaffney. Are you with us, Frank?
I am.
Welcome aboard the Speakeasy, my friend.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
We will try to find a way to accentuate the positive, but having taken your course, and Tony's well into it now too, and we've passed it on to many friends and have it on our website at the top of the website, encouraging people to take it. It is a pretty stern enterprise and incredibly patiently put together. Can you just, I'm sure you're getting good at this. I hope you are. I hope that every radio station in the country is trying to get you on. Can you kind of give our listeners the purpose and the best way to take advantage of going to www.muslimbrotherhoodinamerica.com?
With pleasure. I will tell you, not every radio station has had the good sense that you have, and I'm delighted to be able to visit with you a little bit about it and hope the rest will follow suit. The purpose of the course was really pretty straightforward. It was to provide in what I hope is a reasonably accessible way a tremendous quantity of information that connects a lot of dots. Many of us have been exposed to or perhaps even wondered about, but not been able to understand how they relate to one another, how they fit together, what the larger picture is that is being described by those dots. And to reduce it to its essence, it is a course that helps understand the nature of the threat we're facing today. The enemy threat doctrine, if you will, is what kind of the military term for it, that animates the people we've been exposed to most especially since 9/11. We're told they're terrorists or now violent extremists. In fact, they're jihadists. They embrace an ideology or doctrine they call Sharia, which impels them to engage in jihad. And perhaps the single most important part of the course is to understand that that jihad does not necessarily take the form we've, again, sadly, had to come to grips with since 9/11. We should have before then. We have to varying degrees since then, namely this violent kind of jihad. But there's also another kind. What the Brotherhood, the Muslim Brotherhood, which is the prime practitioner of it, calls civilization jihad. And that's the real essence of the course. It describes how it's being waged here, by whom, and with what effect.
You know, I think our listeners, our state is, of course, mentioned in the course, and we're 75 miles north of St. Cloud, Minnesota here, Mr. Gaffney, where I have seen school boards and generally the community at large slipping into what they call dimitude, which you explain in the course very well, and this information dominance, capitulating to care, letting elements of Sharia into the school system, the kind of special treatment for Islamists, for Islamic religions in the schools, all of the sorts of things that represent what you call civilizational jihad. And 75 miles south of St. Cloud, of course, is Minneapolis, St. Paul, where I've witnessed the police departments unwilling to do extensive investigations of honor crimes, where we have over 100,000 Somalis. God knows how many of them have ever had any sort of a security check. And, of course, we have Congressman Keith Ellison, elected by the good people of Minneapolis, with a history and what he's done since 9/11 that should stick out like the wart on a witch's nose.
Right. Well, you've put a lot on the table, and I think much of it is material that we try to, drill down on in this course at MuslimBrotherhoodInAmerica.com. Just to pick up a couple of points from what you said. there is unquestionably at work in Minnesota a number of different aspects of this civilization jihad, from the effort to essentially engage in what the military again calls information dominance, to tell us what we can know, what we can say, what we can't know and say, and therefore circumscribe what we can do about the efforts being made to insinuate this Sharia agenda, this jihadist doctrine, into our country. Often, unnoticed by many of us, whether it's school boards acquiescing to what amounts to a kind of, the Arabic term for it is dawah, proselytizing for Islam in the curriculums of our schools, whether it's preferential treatment, as you may recall, at the Minneapolis airport for a time. Cabbies were told they didn't have to pick up blind people because the Somalis among them would find that perhaps haram if there were dogs, seeing eye dogs in the mix, to the capital markets where Sharia compliant finance was offered for a time, I think, by the Housing Authority of Minneapolis or Minnesota to accommodate those who didn't want to have interest charged and needed other arrangements. These are the sorts of concessions. They seem innocuous, many of them. They're preferential, to be sure. They play into this idea that everybody must sort of defer or submit to those who adhere to Sharia. But taken together, with many other examples that we could mention, you do find this as part of a kind of steady, incremental, stealthy subversion of, one nation under our Constitution, equal treatment for all, and other fundamental principles of the United States of America.
Their actions in this, I see a lot of it as political correctness, which is, of course, a tactic from the Frankfurt School in the first place. It's not a cultural phenomenon. It is a psychological operation which has been very successful on the American public. They act in a manner that reminds me of what Robert Frost once said: a liberal is a person so broad-minded he won't take his own side in an argument. And that seems to be the political culture surrounding us. You point out in the course, for instance, that AIG received $1 billion in the stimulus package, much of which is funding the Muslim Brotherhood's civilizational jihad.
Well, what we found is this is a prime example of a way in which the American people are being disserved, for sure, and largely led to do things they don't have a clue have bearing on such fundamental precepts as separation of church and state. Here you have the largest purveyor of Sharia-compliant insurance products in the world,
AIG, yeah,
being made a beneficiary of a taxpayer bailout, which resulted in the United States government owning, I think they had it up to 90% or so of AIG, including, as you said, an infusion of over $1 billion directly into the Sharia division of AIG. And when this was contested in court on the grounds that such an arrangement can't possibly be compatible with the Establishment Clause of the Constitution of the United States that provides for that separation between church and state, unfortunately, a federal judge actually said, no, it's okay. It's under appeals now, and hopefully that will be reversed because it's manifestly at odds with this notion that the government of the United States can't treat preferentially any particular faith or religion. And so it's just another example of the sort of thing that is happening under our noses in many cases, and this course is hopefully a means of awakening the public to a civilization jihad being waged against them that I would argue is at least as dangerous to a free and open society, a tolerant society like ours, as is the violent kind of jihad.
You helped President Reagan with the original Team B, and I believe was General Boykin involved in the original Team B as well, right? He was one of the leaders of the original Team B.
Well, to be truthful, I certainly wasn't. I don't think General Boykin was. He was, I believe, in the Army at the time, but I was working for Senator Henry Jackson as a very young man.
Old Scoop Jackson.
Yeah, Senator Scoop Jackson.
Back when Democrats were Democrats, Frank.
I was a Scoop Jackson Democrat in my misspent youth. But here's the point. This reference to Team B is worth just exploring for a moment. What happened was a guy by the name of George Herbert Walker Bush, of all people, was the director of Central Intelligence when a fellow by the name of Johnny Foster came to him and said, you know, it might be a good idea to get a second opinion on this idea that the way we can safely deal with a hostile ideology that explicitly seeks our destruction, namely at the time Soviet communism, is by trying to appease them. And sure enough, this second opinion was provided by a very, very illustrious group of serious national security professionals. They were brought into the CIA by the director, looked at all of the classified information that they could get their hands on about what the Soviets were up to and their order of battle and their doctrine and so on, and they came away thinking and persuasively arguing, this is crazy, this idea of détente. Well, it happened that was very much the view of Ronald Reagan, and he was able to take that Team B report and use it really as a platform for his campaigns, first against Gerald Ford in 1976 and then against Jimmy Carter in 1980. Didn't succeed in the first instance, did succeed in the second, and then more to the point went on to defeat the Soviet Union, really with the intellectual underpinning of Team B. Flash forward, we thought it necessary to do a similar kind of second opinion, independent analysis of today's totalitarian ideology that is equally clear about seeking our destruction, namely Sharia. And General Boykin was very much involved in that, as were 18 others of us who came together to put forward essentially an alternative to the present administration's policies of appeasement of this totalitarian ideology of Sharia. And hopefully it will be as effective in saving the country from the threat of our time as was the Team B-1 effort back in the mid-1970s.
We got our spot sets clipped pretty tight, Frank. We're going to take a very, very short break. It'll only be about a minute and a half or so, or 2 minutes at the max, and come right back. I got another question about the difference between our culture from Team B1 to Team B2. Stay with us, folks. Frank Gaffney. Go to www.muslimbrotherhoodinamerica.com, whatever you do, as soon as the show is over. We'll be right back on the Speakeasy with Guy Green, our guest, Frank Gaffney. The question I wanted to get in, and I'm going to just pique you a little bit. Did you get an email from the National Review today inviting you on to cruise the Great Lakes with Grover Norquist and the readers of National Review?
You know, I didn't. I'm sure it's an oversight, but I probably would decline.
Well, yes, we'll get back to the reason why you should decline, but it's amazing that a publication like National Review can be literally a victim of what Mr. Gaffney is trying to educate the country about. We were talking about Team B1 or Team B, and now your Team B2 approach to the civilizational jihad. What worries me, especially when I watch Chapter 10 on what we can do, and believe me, I think your explanation of what people should do is right on the money. However, I think the culture in the United States has been victim to all these other processes like political correctness and the dumbing down of our education for another generation and a half since Team B1. What did Team B2 find in the way of the possibility of success that Team B1 had vis-a-vis the culture of the country right now and the culture of the rest of Western civilization, for that matter?
Well, Well, it's a great question. To be honest, we didn't address that. The mission of this Team B, this second opinion, was like the first, narrowly focused on the enemy and their threat doctrine and what they were doing to advance it. It's a fascinating topic, and I think many of the people on this Team B would have happily engaged in it, and certainly have in other settings, but we didn't. And I would answer for myself because I can't speak for anybody else on this. But I think what has indeed happened, and we see it playing out in the sort of depiction of the unraveling that we chronicle in our country, in our civic society institutions, in our government. And that is that indeed we have seen the left engage in a kind of wrecking operation for at least a generation and a half, promoting, some people call it political correctness, other people call it diversity or multiculturalism or sensitivity or post-Americanism, postmodernism. I mean, pick any euphemism. What it really comes down to is a notion that what brought this country into being in terms of values, in terms of principles, in terms of guiding lights, is now passé, irrelevant at best, and at worst something to be apologetic about. And so that has very much played into the hands of the Islamists, who have in many cases, as we chronicle in the course at MuslimBrotherhoodInAmerica.com, made common cause. We've called them red-green axes, red for the left and green for the Islamists, that have come together, despite the fact that obviously their end states, their desired end states, would be rather different. I mean, socialists and totalitarian Islamists. But unfortunately, what joins them, and what I think has motivated much of this anti-American culture that you've raised the question about, is a notion that their common foe is the United States, as it has been, as it is now. And they've been, as I say, seriously about the business, jointly and severally, as they say, of trying to, to put it as President Obama did on the eve of his election, fundamentally transform the United States of America.
Mr. Gaffney, Tony Bauer here. I just have a question for you. Guy and I have spent quite a bit of time on the Speakeasy here discussing the problems of having this infiltration, even of the conservative side, in areas of security and policy making. I was just wondering if you had a comment on today's announcement that the Pentagon is shutting down military leadership training that was specifically identifying Islamism as the huge threat that it is, and training our leaders in how to deal with this on a security issue. Your comments on that, about the cancellation by the Pentagon?
Well, this is unfortunately just the latest in a series of these sorts of steps taken under the Obama administration. We now have the Department of Homeland Security promulgating in formal guidance a requirement that basically now training of personnel involved in Homeland Security, and that means not just literally Homeland Security, but intelligence and military and the FBI, law enforcement, anybody using federal dollars, in other words, for these kinds of purposes of defending us, must have their training materials and their trainers vetted by so-called community leaders, which in practice means Muslim Brotherhood front organizations and their, senior officials.
So it has to pass Sharia censorship.
It effectively is a matter of dumbing down what we can know about the threat, choosing quite deliberately, as these Brotherhood folks do, to keep us stupid about it, knowing, as Sun Tzu pointed out 5,000 years ago, that if you don't know who the enemy is, you can't possibly defeat them. That's the trouble here, is that this is not just a one-off thing in the Pentagon today. It's now government-wide. And it's why we think this course, with the effort we're making to really connect these dots, is so necessary. It's important the public understand the full magnitude of the danger we're exposed to as a result of our submission. And that's what it is. The enemy regards it, whatever we call it, multiculturalism, political correctness, and so on, they regard it as submission. And according to the doctrine of Sharia, when they sense the infidel, the enemy, is submitting, they must redouble the effort to make that infidel feel subdued, as the Quran puts it, which means to go violent.
This is such a dark picture. And one of the most stunning parts of the course for me was when you started to get into parts 5, 6, 7, and 8, and you see the extent of the infiltration. Some of the people President Bush was photographed in the mosque in Virginia shortly after 9/11 when we were trying to portray Islam as a religion of peace. Some of those people were Muslim Brotherhood operatives. Some people have been identified as such. Al-Moody comes to mind, and still getting appointed to these commissions like at Department of Homeland Security. And we ask a question on this show all the time, Frank. What has to be true in order for the nonsensical things you see going on around you to make sense? And your explanation in the series of this infiltration answers a lot of those questions. But it is such a all-encompassing, frightening thing to see. I'm glad you close with an hour and 4 minutes of what to do about it. We hope you'll be able to stay through the top of the break and get into a little bit about Grover Norquist, the extent of the infiltration, and what we can do about it, because this, you must feel yourself when you put this course together that this is going to scare the water out of some people. But for Sun Tzu's admonition to work, there has to be someone out there doing what you do. And to have put it together so calmly, so completely, and lay it out there so that if a person takes a weekend and takes this course, that they can get us where we have to be if we're going to win this civilizational battle. We're right up against a computer break for the top of the hour. Can you stay for another segment?
I'd be happy to.
I'm very grateful that you're willing to do that, because your time is valuable, because you're busy saving your country. Stay with us, folks. We'll have more with Frank Gaffney, and go to www.muslimbrotherhoodinamerica.com. For your sake, for your grandchildren's sake. Stay with us.
Adios, adios. Adios, adios.
Oh, everybody that listens to the Speakeasy knows that's Albert Collins, but we'll cut him short tonight because we have some very, very valuable time being spent with us by Mr. Frank Gaffney. Go to his website, www.muslimbrotherhoodinamerica.com, and you'll know exactly what we're talking about. Sorry to subject you to CBS News, Frank, but thanks for staying.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Run us through the Grover Norquist business. We've had a discussion with a Senate candidate here in Minnesota who had his eyes opened about it and is looking into it very closely now. I'm a little dismayed to see the National Review. I certainly wouldn't want to get on a cruise boat with Grover Norquist, knowing what I know now, thanks to you and your group. Could you fill this? This illustrates better than anything, I think, the total infiltration of both parties.
Yeah, I take no pleasure in relaying this story to you, and I wouldn't, frankly, be able to do it but for what I can only describe as an act of providence, which wound up having me subletting office space from Grover Norquist for 7 years. And about a month after we moved into that shared space, including a shared Xerox room and shared conference room, one of my colleagues came to me, and I recount this story in the course, and said, do you know there's an Islamist front group on the other side of that Xerox room? Which I didn't at the time, but I certainly, in the subsequent 7 years, was able absolutely, positively to document was the case. You mentioned a fellow by the name of Abdurrahman al-Amoudi before the break. He was the man with whom Grover set up that Islamist or Muslim Brotherhood front organization for the purpose of, at least in the mind of al-Amoudi, infiltrating, penetrating, and subverting the Republican Party and conservative movement. And he certainly could not have found a more effective helpmate in that than this prominent anti-tax activist named Grover Norquist. Again, we document this to an excruciating degree, I'm afraid, in the course. Fully 5 parts of it deal with one aspect or another of what happened back then in 1998, and then during the Bush campaign for the presidency in 2000, and then during the Bush administration throughout the 8 years, and what, frankly, is continuing to this day. I'd be willing to bet on the cruise there will be some measure of Islamist influence operating at the hands of Grover Norquist. And don't take my word for it. There's actually a clip in the course that you can check out which has Grover personally sharing with I was talking earlier about the Red-Green Axis, sharing with a Red-Green Axis audience, a group of hard leftists in Dearborn, Michigan, who had come together under the banner of something called the National Leadership Conference, with a group of Muslim Brotherhood figures and their friends. And he regaled the audience with how he used his access to a senior senator, a senior Senate leader, he said, to go in and talk about tax issues, his agenda, as he put it, and then work in, would you be willing to meet with Muslim community leaders? And as I said earlier, the kind of community leaders Grover hangs with and that the Obama administration hangs with are exclusively those associated with the Muslim Brotherhood and its operations in the United States. And again, I encourage people not to take my word for it. The documentation is made available at MuslimBrotherhoodinAmerica.com. It's copious. It's all public domain information. I don't have access to classified, aside from some personal first-hand experience, for example, from subletting this space from Grover. It's all information that everybody could have access to.
That's one of the
through this course.
That's one of the most stunning parts of your work, which is truly an amazing accomplishment, and you should be very proud of it. So much of this is these people you are identifying in their own words, pictured with the leaders you are talking about. There is no doubt when you watch this course about what is going on, because it's all laid out much like Glenn Beck does, Frank, with showing videotapes of Stephen Lerner and other people in the Occupy movement. These are their own words, their own photographs, their own writings. And when you have people like General Boykin working with you, I mean, I've seen him appear with Glenn along with Andrew McCarthy and other people, Diana West, who are, I hope, assisting you in this. Maybe you could get a hold of Rich Lowry and have him take the course, because I don't think Bill Buckley would have fallen for Grover Norquist.
To be honest, all 3 of those individuals, by the way, I'm very pleased to say, were contributors to the Team B2 effort that underpins this course. And I just should say a word about that. If people want to check out the book, Sharia, The Threat to America, which is sort of the font of a lot of the analysis and insights that I've found incredibly important to my understanding of this Sharia threat. You can do it by going for free to ShariaTheThreat.com. and you can download the PDF of the entire book. You can get it on a Kindle if you want. You can get it at Amazon if you want, but it is available for free, and I really commend it to you all. And most especially this one passage of it. The second appendix of this book, again, available at shariathethreat.com, is a reproduction in its entirety of an incredibly illuminating document that was introduced into evidence in the largest terrorism financing trial in U.S. history, the Holy Land Foundation trial down in Dallas in 2008. This document is the strategic plan of the Muslim Brotherhood in America, dated 1991, and it still is being applied to this day. And in addition to telling us that the mission of the Muslim Brotherhood in America is a kind of, quote, grand jihad in eliminating and destroying Western civilization from within, they go on to say, sabotaging its miserable house by their hands, meaning ours, and the hands of the believers so that God's religion is made victorious over all other religions. That's an unquote. That is accompanied, interestingly enough, by a list of 29 groups under the heading Our Organizations and the Organizations of Our Friends. And that list of 29, even back in 1991, 21 years ago, it still represents the most important Muslim American organizations in the United States, with one or two exceptions who came into being after 1991. And so it's the Rosetta Stone, and why I always say to people, if you have time only to read one thing out of the Team B report, it's this strategic plan. They call it the explanatory memorandum of the strategic goals of the group. And boy, I'll tell you, it is dynamite reading.
You know, my life is never going to be the same after taking this course. I mean, I've been involved in studying these things, and we've put a group together here called the Minnesota Freedom Council, and Tony and I have been doing the show for a year on our own dime because we wanted to make a difference. The work that you people have done on this project is some of the most important work, I think, that's been done in the history of the Republic, and it's all free. And you're willing to spend a lot of time with us. It's for the life of me, I cannot see why every talk show host in America should be pounding on your door to get you out there and put this message forth, because of the incredible danger we are in. The one thing you say in the course, Frank, is that we're worse off in terms of fighting these people than we were on September 12th, 2001.
I think so, in the following sense. We certainly were not aware of what we were facing on that occasion, and we were ill-prepared to contend with it. We'd been warned. You know, the Cole had been attacked, embassies had been attacked, barracks had been attacked, and the like. But we had really chosen simply to kind of avert our gaze or treat them as criminal enterprises. And therefore, you know, we had a kind of blindness to the threat, for sure. Today, we have a willful blindness.
Oh,
there's
perfect
no excuse
term
for it. I listen, from your lips to God's ears, I hope we'll be having many more of these kinds of conversations. We've had some, and I would welcome the chance, because I think that the thing that will hopefully make this all worthwhile and have the desired effect of awakening our country to this threat of Sharia and how this civilization jihad is being waged against us is if there are as many eyeballs on this product as can possibly be engineered. If everyone listening to this show will not only do as you've asked, take this course themselves, at least take the 15-minute introduction to it, if nothing else, just that, the overview. But please share it with others. You know, as I close the course with a quote that I think is as powerful as any, and if it is resonant with your audience as it has been with me and others, it'll compel people to read to take this course. And it was a quote from Ronald Reagan in 1961, in which he basically said this: "Freedom must be fought for by every generation. It's not passed on to our children in the bloodstream. It must be protected. It must be fought for. It must be handed on to the next generation to do the same. Otherwise, we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was like to live in the United States where men were free. And that's motivated me to put this course together and to do the work that went into it. And I hope it will motivate at least everybody else to take this thing aboard and hopefully pass it on at MuslimBrotherhoodInAmerica.com.
In closing then, Frank, we're going to postpone our little half-hour break here for a little while so we give you a chance to close this out. When I look at Chapter 10 and I see the suggestions, and Tony and I and others have been out putting the advice you give in that 1 hour concluding segment to work on other characteristics and other problems we see, voter fraud, various political things. This is a huge cultural thing. I took great heart from General Boykin's appearance with Glenn Beck in his little documentary, Rumors of War. And I have wondered, and Tony has wondered, why someone from the military active does not step down and tell the American people exactly why they're stepping down. Approaching congressmen and approaching sheriffs and approaching local officials is all good. I agree with you 100% on that. But I have a feeling that America is going to have to be slapped back to consciousness, and I wonder if someone in the military isn't willing to provide that slap.
Well, I don't know. People often say that what it's going to take is a terrible attack on this country.
We've had that.
That's exactly how I respond. I've been hanging around with some senior military people in the past couple of days, and I've been trying to awaken them to the threat. I think most of them aren't really appreciative of this civilization jihad piece. They, like the rest of the country and government certainly, have been focused, if on anything, on that shiny dangling object of the violent jihadists, Al-Qaeda core, as we're telling.
The president tells us that every day now.
Yeah. The truth of the matter is it's a much bigger problem. Some of it is not within the purview of the United States military, and that's what makes it hard for them to address this thing as you suggest they might. But listen, it falls to all of us, whether we're in government or out, whether we're in uniform or out, whether we have had firsthand experience of these sorts of challenges or not, to try to make sure that we bequeath to our children and our grandchildren, as Ronald Reagan said, in the United States that's free. And I salute you for the work that you all are doing and the effort you've taken to study up on this through other means. Rumors of War 3 being a terrific example, by the way, of other vehicles. But please don't let up. Please redouble your own efforts.
We shan't let up.
Show, and I hope your audience will do the same.
Thank you very much. On behalf of my grandchildren, I want to thank you, Frank. And on behalf of everybody involved here with the Speakeasy and our listeners, I congratulate you on some of the best work I've seen in my godforsaken 60 years on this planet. And you're to be very proud and keep up the good work, and Godspeed to you and Team B and everybody in this effort.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.